Today on Brilliant Images, we're going to go over 4 photographers. They all have several things in common. 1, they shot on film, and 2, they are magnum photographers. Let's dive in. The first one we have is Bruce Davidson. Bruce is a very accomplished photographer, American photographer, with many awards and honors to his name, as everyone in this list. He began shooting when he was 10 years old. He met Henri Cartier-Bresson when he was stationed in Paris in the 50s. He's worked for Life magazine. He's a full Magnum member. He's received a Guggenheim Fellowship. He's had a solo show at the MoMA and many other achievements and accomplishments. Let's take a look at this one image here that I just thought was super brilliant in the simplicity and everything about it. It just really caught my eye. It was something I wanted to share with everyone. He did a lot of work, and I've seen several in this series of this homeless girl. And the composition in this image is just fantastic. I love her shape. She is not straight up and down, but she has a little bit of a bend to her. So you can kind of see it goes up like this and then like so. And that just creates a little more visual interest than if she was just standing square to the photo and looking straight at us in one straight line. I really like how her body is all dark against this lighter background, even though it looks like it's kind of evening-ish or starting to get into that darker hour. And holding the cat just creates this other visual interest. I really like how he's got this diagonal line that goes through the image all the way almost to the other side. That adds a lot of dynamicism to the image, where if those weren't in there, if they were running parallel to the image, it would be a little more boring. For some reason, our brain just likes those diagonal lines. The bokeh in the background also adds to the power of this image. It clearly denotes, because they're out of focus and she's in focus, that she is the subject. There's also kind of this line that wraps around here with her bedroll, and it kind of wraps around her, and then it goes up to her shoulder, and then we have this line back here. So our eye really travels well through this image, starting down below here at the circle of the bedroll and then wandering around up almost to her face. And the innocence there and the suffering, the tragedy, you can really see it on her face. One last thing that I like, I talked about the dynamic line that comes from the bottom right and goes up through the image, is her arms. Her arms are at basically a 90-degree, and that also helps create this dynamic presence in the image. Obviously, Bruce is a very accomplished photographer, and setting up and finding the shot, for him was probably nothing. But for us looking at it, it really shows us what good composition and what good creativity looks like when it comes together. Constantine Manos, he is an American photographer. He started shooting at age 13, and within a few years he was working as a professional photographer. I mean, that's pretty amazing. At 19, he was the official photographer of the Boston Symphony. He's a full Magnum member. His book, A Greek Portfolio, has won many awards, and he's done many assignments for Time Life books, just to name a few. Now, there's a lot of brilliance in this image, even though it's just a family sitting at a dinner table. He's got the rule of 3. We've got 3 kind of subjects. He's obviously the subject because he's in focus, while the other 2, the mother and his daughter, are out of focus. And there's just so much greatness happening in this image. The first thing that jumps out at me, well, there's a bunch of stuff that jumps out at me. So I'll come back to the thing I was about to talk to. There is an unstated leading line here from both the mom and the daughter. So they're both looking right at him. And our eye, we follow naturally where other people are looking. So if we see somebody looking at something, we'll be curious and we'll look that way. And that's an unstated leading line, and you can see that happening there. He's not looking at them, so it creates a little bit of tension in the image. But one of the really cool things I like about it is this arrow of the table. It points right at him, and then it's mirrored with his elbow, like so. And the dynamic line just kind of continues with his arm and his shoulder, and that really creates like this powerful dynamicism, just like in the other image. There's no boring lines in this image at all. Even these here in the background do not point or do not go straight up and down with the edge of the frame. Lines that run parallel to the edge of the frame, for some reason, they're more boring. And boring might be the wrong word. They are more sedate, more soothing. And sometimes we want soothing in our images, but a lot of times we want more dynamicism. We've got this messy table here, but even there's repeating elements. We have a lot of circle stuff repeated all through the table. And his face is outlined against the dark shadow of the doorway. All these things come together to make just a really brilliant image that doesn't seem so at first glance, but there's a lot of composition and a lot of, I wouldn't say posing, but I'm pretty sure he told him to open up his body like that, put his arm down, but he probably saw a moment earlier in that evening or just a few seconds before and was just perfecting that shot. George Rodger, he's a British photographer. He's worked for the BBC's Listener magazine. He's covered many, many wars in his time, and I mean the big ones. He saw the liberation of France, Belgium, and Holland. He was the first photographer to go in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. He photographed the Germans' surrender at Lunenburg, and he's also a founding member of Magnum. He was enormously successful in his lifetime as a photographer, and unfortunately he passed away in 1995. I love this image here though. This image is super simple. It has one main compositional element, and that's framing. And I love how this unique doorway here of this tribesman is like a keyhole. And he's coming in, I guess, to get water. It looks like a well. Now remember, he's shooting on film, so he really couldn't take a shot and see if he was getting the exposure right. So he had to rely on his probably decades by the time he was taking that of experience to nail this shot. And his timing is perfect. The gentleman is moving in. His foot is in midair, so we're catching the decisive moment here. His hand is interacting with our compositional element of the framing. And he's even has framed it up perfectly. We have a little bit of margin down here where the bottom of that light isn't cut off. He's got some black silhouette framing in there. And talking about black silhouettes, the inside of the building is completely silhouetted, yet there's still enough light and proper exposure to get the guy and not have the outside blown out due to the high dynamic range of that afternoon sun, I'm sure. This is just a brilliant, brilliant image. And he's even got this object right here on the top third. Let me show you that. Let's go ahead and crop. I'm guessing it's a 4x3. Let's switch that around, move it up and around. Yeah, it's pretty close. He's got it right there. But considering the other elements, how he has he hasn't cut off the bottom of that shadow, that's the best place he could put that little shape. Sergio Larrain, I've got 2 images by him. He is a Chilean photographer. He took up photography at the age of 18 and is a full Magnum member. Just shy, this is interesting, just shy of 20 years as a photographer, he gave it all up to devote himself to the spreading of mysticism, yoga, and he paints mostly now, taking an occasional photo or 2. But this image is another image that just really caught my attention. There's so much going on in it that you don't realize that he's really incorporating composition on the fly. We have some framing elements here. We have this gentleman that's framing up the right-hand side, the left-hand side, and that keeps us as a viewer, our eye, from going off the side of the frame there. It blocks our eye and it brings us back into him. We also have her as this curve matching up with this curve here, which on a busy street, that is so hard to get. It's almost impossible. I don't know how he did it. Even our silhouetted image, we can tell he's looking at her, this guy's looking at her, and this guy probably did look at her, but then he noticed Sergio, so he's looking at Sergio. And he is somewhat of a blocking element on this side. So we have a man over here, and we have a man over here, and in between we have this woman who is the subject, but we can't even see her face. So how do we know she is the subject? Well, one, all of our leading lines are taking us to her. His and this one, and she is not obstructed. We can see her clearly. All the circumference of her, all of it. Where this gentleman, he is a little bit merged with this kind of blob over here, and he's also too far to the edge for him to be the subject. So we know she is the subject there. We also kind of have these dynamic lines coming in down here, adding a little bit more dynamism to the image. And then you can kind of tell where this image takes place by this double-decker bus right there. I just really love this image, and I love how he balanced it out. She's not on the third. She might be on the golden ratio. Let's take a look at that. All right, let's flip through those. She's pretty close to being on the golden ratio. You can see the golden ratio line right here. Let's bring over a guide and remove that. Bring back our guides. There we are. So she's not quite on the golden ratio, but she's pretty close. But being street photography, photographing on the fly, you can't get that kind of stuff perfect. You got to take the shot when you have it, capture that decisive moment, and you let those compositional elements land where they do. Let's look at one more. This is the final one. Man, I love this one too. It's so brilliant. Even though she's out of focus, we got to remember again, we're talking film, manual focus lenses, not autofocus lenses, street photography, what's moving around, and I still love it. I still think it's brilliant. I talked about dynamic lines and diagonal lines and the other ones and how they make a for a more dynamic image. Well, we don't have that in this one, and that's okay. He is perfectly perpendicular to us, walking straight across our scene. She is perfectly parallel with us, full front. And then we can see these lines here, very level, very straight. And this line here, very level and very straight. And they are parallel perfectly with the edge of our frame. Now, I said that can make a boring photo, And boring is the wrong words. Sometimes, I like to see no boring lines, but sometimes we want lines to make a very soothing scene. And I'm not sure if this had that soothing scene to it, but there's something about it that I really, really like. There's also a little bit of the rule of 3 going on here. We've got 3 crates of this lemon soda, and I love having the words lemon soda in the image. It just adds this kind of graphic design element to it. And then she's just a beautiful woman on the street. Maybe it's a friend of his. A lot of these photographers travel around with beautiful friends that they can pose in different places and stuff like that. So she's just got this wholesome, beautiful quality to her, a nice smile, and I don't know what it is about this image that I really, really like, but it's a brilliant image. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that, and every week I'm going to come to you with several brilliant images that I find when I'm studying composition and that really capture me, and I'm going to bring them to you, and we're going to break them down and show you all the compositional elements that are in there. Coming up soon, in about 2 or 3 weeks, I am on Matt Payne's F-Stop Collaborate and Listen podcast, so be looking for that. And until the next time, happy shooting.